Good morning and welcome to a special follow-up edition of STARCAST from Planet Waves. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino. I'm a counseling astrologer and I'm a writer and broadcaster. Most of you listening have met me, though we are sending some of these podcasts out to far corners of the internet so that we may better be discovered by newcomers. I'm the editor of planetwaves.net, the host of planetwaves.fm, and there are also Substacks at planetwaves.org and planetwaves.eu. Basically anything but .com. I'm here to talk about and follow up on a topic that I introduced at the end of last night's edition of STARCAST. I don't usually do two of these in a row, but this does warrant further discussion. And though I'm aware there may not be very many people interested in this topic, there are some for whom it's going to be a deep interest, particularly those who have not abandoned your healing journey, your growth process, on the excuse that life is just too hectic to deal with being alive. And this is, I think, a problem that has been radically amplified by what I'm calling full digital conditions. And so far as I can tell, almost no one is actually addressing this problem. And very few people have identified it or are even considering it. So it is one of these ubiquitous environmental, spiritual crises of our day that doesn't come to a head in any form that can be recognized. It comes to a head in the form of banking collapses and COVID and name the latest the immigrant crisis in New York. And all of these things are connected because they are all part of the ground of a society that has been completely swallowed by its technology. We have become the products of our technology. And I have read the quote from Conversations with God, Book 3, many times about how when a society becomes the product of its technology, rather than its technology being its own product, it destroys itself. Now, we're always being formed by the tools that we make, but there's something very, very different going on with digital, because nothing has ever so infused every single facet of our lives and infiltrated every single relationship. Now, the aspect that I am describing is I've made a very simple astrology chart at the bottom of the Substack version of this. I'm going to leave this post open, so if you're listening somewhere else and you're looking for this diagram, this chart, go to planetwaves.eu and it will be one of the top posts. The headline is Focus, Ceres-Eris Opposition. So let me just describe again what that is. Planet called Ceres has about a 4-year orbit. It looks like a little purple question mark. That is a very appropriate symbol. It is also right next to that little upside down orange horseshoe. That is called the south node of the moon. The nodes are part of one system, the south and the north. And on the north node, up at the upper right part of the chart, is a right side up horseshoe with the open end pointing down, and a planet with a circle and an oval and an arrow pointing down. That is Eris. So Ceres has an orbit that is like 125 times shorter than Eris. It's 4-ish years, and Eris is about 551 years. They keep adjusting the length of the orbit. It's so far away that they redo the calculations as their orbital arc increases. It's actually quite a short orbital arc because it was only first spotted around, I think, 2004. So Ceres is, I find it to be a very elusive minor planet. And I've delineated about 100 minor planets. I developed my own delineations based on old ones, and that means you take a thing that was just discovered and you look at certain properties of it and the discovery chart and so forth, and you can figure out what this thing is about. But Ceres, I have found to be quite difficult, and it's one of the first ones I started working with. I've been working with minor planets since pretty much the day after I started studying astrology, when I realized that they were asteroids to work with, and then Chiron, and then so on. But Ceres is fundamentally about our relationship to food. I believe that Ceres represents Gaia, the Earth Mother. It is related to Isis and the Virgin Mary as one of the, let's say, prime goddesses of like cultural focus. So the fact that Ceres is an outgrowth of Demeter, who is a grain goddess, is indicative that this is about sustenance. But it's also about sustenance and the earth providing for us. But it's also about relationships between mothers and daughters, since central to the mythology of Ceres, or Demeter, is the descent of Persephone to the underworld Persephone, or Persephonia, depending on if it's Greek or Roman, to cavort with and be the wife of the god of the underworld. Okay, so there's all this stuff about separation and emotional bonding between mothers and daughters, grief between mothers and daughters, and also the relationship of food to the emotions. It's a very important time right now because we eat a lot of things, and while we may think about how they make us look, or how we think they make us look, we don't usually think much about how different foods and food additives make us feel. For example, plenty of people say that a lot of the kind of nervous buzz you get from coffee comes from the fact that it's drenched with pesticides in most cases. Certainly all the stuff you're getting at convenience stores. Okay, so food, the emotions, grief, mothers and daughters, loss, and reconciliation. This is in Libra. It is sitting on the South Node. It is an old issue, and it is something that is appearing to be stuck in a kind of a karmic loop. Now let's go to the North Node. The North Node is taking an exact conjunction, or forming one, because it's moving quicker, to Eris. Eris is a planet that has been in Aries since 1922. It took a little while to fully go in, so it was kind of fading in and out, starting in 1922, but that's when it first touches Aries. And my delineation of this is how we have become fragmented, pushed out of our bodies and out of our minds, out of our native internal consciousness by electrical media. And it is something of the harbinger of the fragmentation of artificial intelligence and what living completely soaked in digital technology had for now nearly 30 years. This is started recently, went by quickly, and the decades have melted on. I acquired my first computer in the summer of 1989, and I worked on one since the summer of 1984. So we're up to almost my career, 29 years. I'm at the Saturn return of sitting at a desk with a computer. And this has tremendous, the environment created by digital has a transformative effect on people. And now we are being beamed with wireless signals. I'm sure you've marveled at when you click at, log into your Wi-Fi networks. I just clicked on mine. I'm looking at about 40 networks. I live in a little town called Kingston, New York. If we're doing this in New York City, the list would go down to the floor, if you could read that far. And Eris is on the North Node. It is where we are heading. and it is also representing the quest that we are on, the pull of Dharma, the challenge of committing to reality, basically. Now, I'm going to redo this chart, and I'm going to include Pluto. Pluto is sitting approximately square the lunar nodes. By approximately, I only mean by about 3 degrees. That's a pretty close square. And part of the whole 2020 crisis was a series of 7 contacts between Pluto in Capricorn and Eris in Aries. And we can see that this is, on one hand, had a very detrimental effect on people. On the other hand, there have been those whose steely resolve who has been strengthened, whose commitment has been affirmed by the crisis, who have risen above and risen to the occasion of this crisis, and who are not taking it casually or sitting down and refusing to sleep through it. But I will tell you that, quite sadly, even many of those people, and I know a lot of them, are displaying rather colossal blind spots. There are missing elements and what I observe to be a real crisis of a lack of integration, integrating different things, and in other words, facets of themselves, and bringing them together and reconciling with every part of us that has been cast off. And one of the things that Eris represents are the parts of us, of ourselves, that we have cast off. Pluto, I think that Jeff Green got one thing right anyway, which is that Pluto represents an evolutionary impulse. And Pluto square the nodes means that Pluto is sitting right on the nodes. The square to the nodes, I think, is one of the most potent aspect structures in all of astrology. And it is insisting that we do the work of Pluto as part of doing the spiritual growth work of the nodes. So there cannot be evolution, growth, without working the nodes. And when you've got Pluto sitting right there, that is putting a great big kind of a check stop in the way, saying, all right, this thing you call growth is not going anywhere unless you really do it. And we're in the age of thinking that you can get therapy by text message. Therapy by text message. How about that? Where is the reflexiveness, the sanctity of the counseling room, the trusted relationship with the teacher, the ability to mutually read body language, all of these important things that are part of the physical world that we are casting off from ourselves by being so overwhelmed by the digital realm. So I was prompted to do this follow-up, first of all, feeling strongly this topic needs to be discussed, and I would encourage you to please add your thoughts to the comments if you don't think it takes too long to collect an idea and share it, by a letter from a reader. And she adds, I'm going to read the whole letter, but she adds a P.S. Remember this from Matthew? I mentioned the book of Matthew. It's not what goes into the mouth of a man that makes him unclean and defiled, but what comes out of the mouth. This makes a man unclean and defiles him. That would be all of us, men and women. I gave a rant about this last week at the beginning of Planet Waves FM, and I'm going to repeat that rant this week in a new way. Not quite a rant. I try to stay fairly calm when I am presenting, but in my own style, a vociferous, emphasized point that I'm constantly reading people claiming to be uncensored and giving the whole truth and accusing all kinds of other people of lying. And it's not often that I can get through 3 paragraphs or even two, or sometimes one, without finding a fairly blatant falsehood or foundation of what of a premise that is just not there. And I know of no other publication, not like the New York Times or something like that, but all these people publishing who have a published editorial policy stating the rules of the road, the code that they live by. And it is upsetting to me to see all of this accusation, but no reflection, no sharing what they feel the bottom line is for them in terms of what they determine to be true or not. I will give you one example that I read last night on the Substack of a rather famous journalist whom I know personally, who issued a post that said that Barack Obama didn't go to Columbia University. Now, I'm not a fan of Barack Obama, but I happen to have a friend who was at Columbia at the same time that he was. He's a little older than me. Obama's a little bit older than him. And he would see Obama in the library all the time. He's a very difficult figure to miss. He's a very distinctive-looking man. He smokes a lot. He did that. And the friend that I'm talking about, I've been buddies with since 1979, I think. 1970, isn't that long? Don't I sound like the guy in the corner store? I've been friends with that guy, Mike, for 40 years. We've been friends for 40 years. Well, this is more like 45. Well, I mean, Obama certainly attended Columbia. I have no reason to believe he didn't graduate. Now, a real journalist would write back and say, "Oh, that's interesting. I'll add that to my story." No. So most of what's going on is designed to engage your sense of being injured, but more so your sense of panic. There is a sense of panic in the air that I'm finding to be palpable right now. Let me read this letter from a reader named Amanda. Not an Amanda we've ever heard from. Hi, Eric. Listening to tonight's program and reflecting about the opposition of conjunction, pardon me, let's read that again. Listening to tonight's program and reflecting about the conjunction of Ceres in the North Node, I think that the call to heal trauma that keeps us in a state of separation from ourselves, others, and the world around us. There might be a missing is in that sentence. Let me try that again. Listening to tonight's program and reflecting on the conjunction of Ceres in the Node, I think about the call to heal the trauma that keeps us in a state of separation from ourselves, others, and the world around us. Now that makes sense. So she's saying that she's contemplating this calling to heal this trauma that's keeping us in a state of separation from others and ourselves. It's a beautiful part of life to experience the relationship dynamics that Libra presents to all of us. But how easy it is to lose ourselves in the duality of separation. Just as you were mentioning last week, a damaged body cannot forgive. That was from A Course in Miracles on the fear of healing. I will add a link to that at the bottom of this Substack. Again, if you're looking for this, you're somewhere else, planetwaves.eu. It'll be right at the top. We need to address our pain. I see Eris on the other side in conjunction to the North Node as a call to have the courage to collect our fragments, particularly those we feel more ashamed of. Move past duality and understand that we are one, that we do to others as we do to ourselves. As we were saying last week, the fear of healing we must face. How far can we go with our unhealed trauma is a question I always have. But just as Ceres found resolution to her immense grief, I believe we can find a way to heal. The question is how or where to find the right support. The Eleusinian, I don't know how to pronounce this, Eleusinian mysteries. God, the vowels in the English language. Eleusinian mysteries. These were the rites of Demeter, and were one of the most important. Let's say, I don't want to call it a festival, but something like that in Rome, and then in Greece, and then Rome, where it was really not known what was going on at the center of all of this, and it's likely that there was the use of some psychedelic substance, and there are conditions under which grain can grow a mold called ergot, which contains a psychedelic drug. The Eleusinian mysteries point toward an initiation ritual that involved deep transformation, a form of death. The return of Persephone is another expression of how things can be so different, but also fine when we have healed. We are in a death trap, desperately looking for a way to die so the pain can stop. I know the food that we eat is essential. However, I see Ceres showing us that our ways have poisoned the food that we eat. Ceres, as the goddess of grain, is reminding us of the seeds we have planted. Just some thoughts I share with you. And then again, I'll read this quote. It's not what goes into the mouth of a person that makes them unclean and defiled, but what comes out of the mouth that makes them unclean and defiles them. I'd like to see a lot more commentary from writers about how it is that you go through your process of determining what is a valid thing to say to your audience. And I would call on people who read anything whatsoever on the internet to get in contact with what you feel is or perceive to be the process of ascertaining the truth that any writer has. And can't just accept what they say. I mean, I know we go to a lot of restaurants and we don't know what the holy heck is going on in the kitchen. But write back to these substackers and find people and see if they'll bother to see if they will respond to you. Today's Planet Waves FM contains an interview. Thankfully, this is most of the program, and it's already done. It's a conversation between me and Roland Angle, an engineer who is the chairman of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I continue to revisit this issue at least once a year, that being the issue of what exactly happened on September 11th, 2001. I think that this is a smoking, gaping crater in our spiritual and cultural lives. I think that most people suspect that there was something wrong, that this should not have happened. Really, I would like to say that it could not have happened, except that it did. And we talk about the engineering of the buildings, how they were built, the theories on how they fell down, and then we focus on what appears to be the most likely one. So I invite you to join me for that. That usually posts on the planetwaves.fm website, also on the Planet Waves FM Substack at planetwaves.org. Remember, ORG is a nonprofit organization, so it's .org, it's a .org. And that usually goes up by about 5 or 6 o'clock at the latest Eastern Time on Friday. I am doing my best to regather the Planet Waves flock. Most of the people who were overtly raging at me for daring to violate their TV show in 2020 and look behind the script and see what was going on have left. There are some harboring, I think, what I'll call silent hostility, but there are many of you who do take solace and comfort in my work. That is why I'm doing it. There's certainly a lot of things that I could be doing, But right now, at this time of humanity, this is the thing to do. By the way, I'm also going to be speaking about my trip to the Love Canal area of Niagara Falls, New York, out in western New York. That was where I was the day that the Ceres-Eris Opposition on the lunar nodes was exact. I was visiting, documenting, photographing, speaking with people who live in a neighborhood that was built on top of and around a 22 or 21,000 ton toxic and nuclear waste dump. The waste dump is still there. About 700 homes have been removed. About 300 or 400 still exist, and I will have my full photographic report on that at the season finale of Planet Waves FM on September the 22nd, after which time I'm going to take a couple of weeks off. All right, once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for your subscription support. This Substack is a very good place to subscribe to Planet Waves. It is relatively inexpensive for what it is, which is basically very good quality therapy, astrology, and spiritually grounded discussion, prepared with, let's say, very clear intent, and developed over a long time. It took me a long time to be able to do what I do today. So if you've been with me all those years, thank you. And I look forward to catching back up with you tonight on Planet Waves FM. Once again, thank you for listening, and bye for now.